Have you found yourself having difficulty painting the human nose? I am right there with you. When I was first starting painting portraits many years ago, I had a lot of trouble with noses. There's a lot of intricate little things that happen with the changes of direction and the shape of a nose. All kinds of little things you have to consider when you're painting a nose that can really make it one of the more difficult portions of the face to work on. So today I thought I'd talk about that for a little bit. Now, before I get started, I just want to quickly mention that this video has been cut down from its original length that is on my Patreon page. If you want to see this full tutorial along with tutorials for the eyes, the ears, mouth, all of those different portions of the face, you can go over to my Patreon page and learn all about how to approach these different areas of the portrait. Now, if I had to guess what areas of the nose you're having the most trouble with, it's somewhere probably around the tip of the nose, whether it's the nose tip itself, whether it's around the nostrils. There's so many different changes of direction happening in this area that I don't blame you for having troubles in this area. It's not something that comes easily. It can be more or less difficult depending on the lighting direction. So many things can make a nose easier to paint or harder to paint. And I've gone through so many different ways of painting the nose and seeing how the lighting can affect the difficulty that I just wanted to go over some things that I think will make it a little bit easier for you today. Now, first off, I think it all comes down to seeing the shapes. I know I talk about this a lot in my Patreon tutorials and in YouTube. I've mentioned this a few times, but seeing the shapes that build the nose, or really just build the entire face, is what is going to be the key to making this all seem a little bit simpler in your head. So with this nose, before I even got started, I made sure to look at it overall to see how the lighting direction is affecting the nose itself, how it's accentuating certain portions of the nose shape, and how it's maybe going to be a little bit more difficult in certain areas to get those subtle light and color shifts to make the nose appear accurately. So what I did was, again, keeping it very simple. I started with the darkest areas around the nose first. I started from dark to light. That is one of the most common ways that oil painters will paint for a few different reasons, but it just really helps for you to see the shapes of the dark areas first. So you almost want to blur your eyes, squint your eyes at the area around the nose, and just see the general shape that those shadows are making around the whole nose. And after that's done, I get into the more mid-tone areas, get those general shapes. So what I do is I combine different tones into one grouping. So the dark areas maybe have 3 to 4 different slight variations of darkness. I combine those all together into one dark level at first, just to keep it simple. The same goes for the midtones and the highlights. I group all of those together to get those midtones and highlights as one particular shape. After that's all done, and I would consider that the first rendered pass, you go through and you start again. You go, okay, how can I bring some extra level of detail into this nose? That's when you start to look at the slight variations of curvature that are happening in the nose, because some areas are turning sharper than others, some turn down, some turn to the sides, some are curving more gradually depending on what part of the nose it is. And this is where you really have to focus in, take steps back, and really just analyze the nose. Analytical skills when you're painting portraits is one of the key things that every artist needs to do. Whenever you're painting something that is going to be based on life, something that you're trying to represent as accurately as possible, you're gonna have to use your analytical side of your brain. I know as artists, we don't want to analyze too much. It is definitely a different part of the brain you're using to analyze versus be creative, but you have to find a way to mesh those two skills together to accomplish an accurate representation of the nose. Now, after that's all done, it's really just about fine-tuning. I know it sounds simple to say it that way, but that is really the key to anything. Step by step, don't get ahead of yourself. Make sure that you have the big shapes figured out first, then start working on the smaller shapes. For this one, for example, I didn't even worry about the nostrils on the first pass. That's one of those smaller details, but once I had those bigger shapes in place, I had some of the general tones in place, that's when you start worrying about the nose placement within those bigger shapes, and you just keep progressing. Just like that, over and over again, going through that methodical rhythm of looking at the big things, looking at angles, looking at how certain shapes are adjacent to others and how the proportions of other shapes relate to others. There are so many different ways to help you along the way to get an accurate and efficient painting of a nose completed. Just like anything though, it's going to take many efforts to get better with painting the nose, just like the eyes, the mouth. Everything has its own difficulties. With the nose, I would say paint 10, 20 different noses with different lighting. Just take a selfie of yourself and use that as reference. And when you're doing this, try to keep the lighting as simple as possible at first. Try to use a single lighting source like the window from the side, or have a single light bulb above you that's on and creating some very sharp shadows. The one thing you want to try to avoid, especially when painting the face or the nose in general, is do not use a photo that has been taken with the flash on. If there is one type of photo that is very difficult to recreate as a painting, it's a photo that has the flash on, especially when you're doing a portrait and the flash is coming from right above the camera itself. This will flatten out all the facial features, especially the nose, and it will make learning to paint the nose more difficult. Now, after you've painted from a single light source from different places, like the window or a single light above you, feel free to try one where the lighting is flatter, but it will get more and more difficult the more the lighting flattens out the facial features. Now with this painting, I've basically painted the nose. I'm essentially just at that point where I'm having a little bit of fun. And this is what you need to have, is a little bit of fun with each of your paintings, just to make sure that you're not stressing yourself out through the whole process. So for this nose tutorial, I decided I'm going to get very abstract with these last brush strokes, put in some expressionism and a lot of brush gestures that make it a little bit more exciting than just a simple nose study. And that's the key to my practice. When I'm oil painting, I always try to find some place on the painting surface to have some fun. If it's all about being really specific and exact all the time, you're going to burn yourself out. You need to take breaks. You need to have some fun, try new tools, try new brushes, try different paint supplies that are out there. There's a lot of things to explore in the art world, so don't just try to paint a nose 20 times in a row. Paint a nose once, maybe then try to paint the mouth, the eyes, a whole portrait, and rotate through a bunch of different things so that you keep your painting practice fresh and you don't find yourself getting burned out too quickly. Now that I'm down to just a handful of brush strokes, I want to quickly mention again that I do have a Patreon page that has a bunch of tutorials that will show you all the insights into how I approach oil painting, from creating noses, mouths, eyes, all of those things. I also get into color matching, color theory, anything in between. You can find that link in the description below. Please like this video, subscribe. I do have an Instagram account that I update very regularly. Thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. I will talk to you again very soon.